Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's great to be back with you.
It is.
And for those of you joining us through our special collaboration for this episode, welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
Yeah, we're really excited about this one.
We really are looking forward to this one because we're tackling a subject that, quite honestly, touches every single one of us. Eventually.
Oh, absolutely. There's no escaping it.
But we're looking at it through a lens that feels, well, it feels completely new and maybe a little bit challenging to our traditional sensibilities.
It really does. It's one of those topics where technology and the most primal human emotions collide in a way that just forces you to rethink how we connect.
Exactly. And I have to admit, when I first looked at this stack of research for this deep dive, all these articles on digital grief and interactive memorials, I had a bit of a visceral reaction. My gut check was, are we really going to disrupt funerals? I mean, come on. Because there is something about the funeral industry, about the rituals of death, that feels untouchable.
Sacred almost.
Sacred, yeah. It's ancient, it's solemn, it's steeped in tradition. It feels like the one place Silicon Valley just shouldn't go.
And that is such a common reaction. I think most people feel that way initially.
You think so?
Definitely. We have apps for dating, for banking, for grocery shopping, for, walking our dogs. But when it comes to mourning, we largely rely on tools that haven't changed since, the Victorian era?
That's a really good point.
And your hesitation is actually the perfect starting point because what all the sources we looked at argue is that we're clinging to some of these rituals not because they are perfect.
But just because we know them.
Exactly. Simply because they are familiar. But familiar, it doesn't always mean effective, especially not in the modern world.
Right. Okay, so let's set the scene. I want to take everyone back to a very specific shared experience.
Okay.
I want you to close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving. Please don't close your eyes if you're driving.
Please don't.
But imagine you are walking into a funeral home or a church service. You're wearing uncomfortable shoes. Maybe a tie that's a little too tight, or heels that are pinching.
I can feel it already.
You walk into the vestibule. The lighting is dim. It smells like lilies and maybe slightly dusty carpet.
Huh.
And what is the very first thing you encounter?
It's the podium, the little wooden stand with the book on it.
The book. The guest book. And there is almost always a fancy pen attached to a chain.
Oh, the chain.
Which has always struck me as so cynical. Like we are in a house of worship or a place of solemn remembrance, and yet we are worried someone's going to run off with the ballpoint pen.
It's a very specific vibe, isn't it? It says, we trust you to grieve, but not with our office supplies.
It is. It is. So you wait in line. It's quiet. You step up. You sign your name. Maybe, if you are feeling particularly bold or, close to the family, you write, "So sorry for your loss." And then you walk away.
And that's the interaction.
That is the quintessential image of how we document our presence at a funeral.
It is. And if we really, analyze that object, the traditional guest book, it serves a very specific historical function. It is a static record.
Yeah.
It is essentially a ledger. It answers exactly one question. Who showed up?
It's an attendance sheet. That's all it is.
Exactly. It was a roll call. I was physically present in this room between 10:00 a.m. and 11:00 a.m. on this specific Tuesday.
Right.
And it was designed for a time when grief was very, very localized. You lived in the town you were born in, you died there, your neighbors came, they signed the book, and that was the extent of the community.
The circle of grief was the zip code.
Pretty much. The book was closed at the end of the service, given to the family, and usually put on a shelf.
And probably never opened again.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, how many people pull that book down 5 years later to check signatures?
Rarely. I would guess almost never, because it wasn't a tool for healing.
Right.
It was a tool for accounting.
Accounting. That is such a clinical way to put it. But you're absolutely right. It feels bureaucratic. But here's the thing, and this is what we are unpacking today. The world isn't local anymore. My best friends live in 3 different time zones. My former colleagues are scattered across the continent. My family's in the Midwest.
Right.
If something happens to me, half the people, maybe 80% of the people who actually care about me, who know my jokes and my stories, they physically cannot get to that podium to sign that book.
And that is the crux of the problem. That's the disconnect. In the traditional model, if you aren't in the room, you are invisible.
You don't count.
Your grief isn't recorded. Your support isn't felt in that, that official record.
So what happens to that grief? Where does it go?
That is the central question of our deep dive today. We are looking at the evolution from that static physical book to, well, to interactive digital guest books.
Right.
And I want to be really clear right off the bat. We aren't just talking about digitizing a list of names. This isn't just a PDF of signatures.
Or a Zoom call where you just watch a service from your kitchen.
Exactly. We are talking about a fundamental psychological shift in how humans process what we call collective grief.
I love that term, collective grief. It sounds heavy, but as we went through the research for this, I realized it's actually incredibly hopeful.
It is. It's about community, not isolation.
So our mission today is to explore this shift. We're going to look at why attendance is being replaced by participation.
A key difference.
We're going to talk about the psychology of the grief container, which is a fascinating concept I can't wait to get into. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how these platforms actually work, the ethics of them,
Well, the ethics are huge.
and why they might actually be better than the real thing in some very specific ways.
And we absolutely need to talk about the dangers. Because whenever you bring the internet into a sacred space, there are risks.
Oh, absolutely. The last thing you want is a troll in the obituary comments.
Or someone trying to sell crypto on a memorial page. It's horrifying to think about, but it's a real concern.
It is.
Precisely. So we need to look at how to design these spaces for compassion, not for likes or engagement metrics.
Okay, let's dive into section 1. Let's redefine this idea of collective grief. Because I think, especially in the West, we have this very specific script for grief.
We do.
We have this idea that grief is something you do alone. You go into your bedroom, you draw the curtains, and you just, process it.
You're so right. We have a highly individualistic narrative of grief. We think of it as a solitary journey.
A pride of burden.
Exactly. You know the sayings, everyone grieves in their own way, or you just have to go through it. And while it is true that the internal experience is unique, that narrative ignores the biological and sociological reality that we are herd animals. We are social creatures. When a loss happens, it doesn't just happen to a spouse or a parent. It disrupts an entire ecosystem.
An ecosystem. I really like that imagery. It's not just a single tree falling. It shakes the whole forest.
Think about it. A person isn't just one thing. They are a coworker, a member of a bowling league, a cousin, a neighbor, the regular at a coffee shop.
All these different roles.
When they die, that loss ripples through all those separate networks. Collective grief is what happens when those networks mourn together. It's the validation of emotion.
It's the Me Too of sadness.
It is. It's
Yeah,
looking at someone else and seeing your own pain reflected in their eyes. It's that shared understanding.
Which historically happened in, the church parking lot or the living room during a wake. That was where the ecosystem met.
Exactly. Physical space was the container. You showed up, you hugged, you told stories over a casserole. But here's the problem with the modern world we just touched on. Space and time.
Right, the locality issue. You can't just pop over with a casserole if you live 2,000 miles away.
We are dispersed. And even when we do gather, funerals are often shorter now. They are more rushed. Or, think about the last few years. Health constraints, travel costs, work schedules. Sometimes you just physically cannot be there.
I've been there. I've watched a funeral on a live stream. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad the technology exists because it's better than nothing.
Sure.
But it feels hollow. You're watching it like a TV show. You aren't in it. You can't turn to the person next to you and share a tissue.
You're a spectator.
You are just a viewer. It's a passive experience.
That is the gap. That is exactly where the interactive digital guest book comes in. It solves the problem of where does the collective energy go when we can't be in the same room? It creates a shared emotional space that exists outside of geography and, crucially, outside of time.
That time aspect is huge, and I want to circle back to that later because the timeline of grief is a whole topic on its own.
It really is.
But first, I want to nail down this distinction the source material made between attendance and participation. Because this felt like the light bulb moment for me.
It is the core thesis. It's everything. The old way, the physical book, is attendance. I was here.
Check, I showed up.
It is a binary state. You are present or you are absent. If you are there, you sign. If you aren't, you don't. Simple as that.
And if you're absent, you're effectively invisible to the history of that event. You're erased from the record.
Correct. But participation is different. Participation is active. It requires effort and engagement with the memory of the deceased.
It's contribution.
Yes. In these digital spaces, participation isn't just signing a name. It's sharing a memory of a childhood prank. It's uploading a photo from a college road trip that the family has never even seen.
Right.
It's writing a letter to the deceased about how much they meant to you, even if you never said it in life.
It's the difference between a roll call and a conversation.
Beautifully put. That's exactly it. And why this matters, why it's not just a nice to have or some tech gimmick, is that humans have a fundamental need to be seen in their grief.
To have it acknowledged.
If I am grieving my friend and I just sign a book, nobody knows what that friend meant to me. The family sees my name and thinks, oh, nice of him to come.
But they have no context for your relationship.
None. But if I write a story about how he saved my career or how he helped me through a divorce, and his family reads that, suddenly my relationship is validated. The layered narrative of the person is
A
revealed.
layered narrative. That is such a key concept here.
Mm.
Because a signature is flat. It's 2D. A story has depth. It has texture.
Mm.
And that leads us perfectly into the psychology of this. The outline talks about this concept of the container. Now, when I hear container, I think Tupperware.
Huh. Right.
Or maybe a shipping container. But I have a feeling that's not what the psychologists mean.
Not quite, though the idea of holding something is the same. In grief psychology, a container is essentially a safe holding space for emotion.
Okay.
It is a structure that allows you to fall apart without feeling unsafe. It provides boundaries.
So the funeral service itself is a container.
Yes. Think about the structure of a funeral. It has a start time. It has an end time. It has rituals, music, specific readings.
A schedule.
Right, a schedule. Those boundaries create a safe space where it is socially acceptable, even encouraged to cry, to wail, to mourn openly.
It's the designated time for falling apart.
Exactly. But a funeral is a temporary container. It lasts an hour or two, then the service ends.
And then you have to walk out to the parking lot, back into the bright sunshine.
You walk out, you get in your car, and you have to merge onto the highway. You have to go pick up your dry cleaning. The container dissolves.
Oh, man.
You are back in real life, but you are still carrying this massive, messy weight of grief.
And that transition is so jarring. It's brutal.
Yeah.
You go from sobbing to sitting in traffic listening to a pop song on the radio. It feels like whiplash.
Exactly. The interactive digital guest book acts as an extension of that container.
It keeps it open.
It creates a communal holding space that doesn't close at noon on Tuesday.
Right.
It stays open. It allows the grief to be expressed incrementally.
Incrementally.
You can log in at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. You can visit it on your lunch break. The container is accessible whenever the wave of grief hits you.
That is such a relief to hear. Because I think a lot of people feel pressure to get it all out at the funeral.
Oh, for sure.
And if they don't cry, or if they're just numb, which is totally normal, by the way,
So normal. The shock response.
they feel like they failed at grieving, or that they missed their chance.
We call that delayed processing, and we will definitely touch on that. But within this digital container, there's another mechanism at work called collective witnessing.
This is powerful stuff.
Break that down for us. What is witnessing in this context? It sounds legal?
It does, but here it's emotional. Witnessing is the act of seeing and acknowledging someone else's experience.
Okay.
It's the antidote to isolation. One of the hardest parts of grief, especially in modern society, is the feeling that you are the only one whose world has stopped.
Oh, that's so true.
Everyone else is buying coffee and going to work and posting vacation pictures, and you are stuck in this bubble of pain.
It's incredibly isolating. You feel like a ghost in your own life. Exactly. But when you scroll through a digital guest book and you read 50 other stories about the person you lost, two things happen.
Where are they?
First, you realize you are not alone. That isolation cracks open. You see that others are hurting too.
It's proof of community. Proof that the person mattered to others, not just to you.
Yes. And second, it validates your own emotions. If you are angry that they died, and anger is a very common stage of grief.
They're coming.
And you read a post from a cousin who is also angry, your anger feels normalized. It feels less, scary or wrong.
You're not a bad person for feeling what you feel.
Precisely. It moves the healing from a private, internal struggle into a relational experience.
It reminds me of, well, it sounds almost like group therapy, but asynchronous.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't have to be in the circle at the same time, but you are still in the circle.
That's a perfect description. You are contributing to the whole without the pressure of real-time performance. And the fuel for this witnessing is storytelling. The source material emphasizes this heavily. Storytelling is how we integrate memory with meaning. We don't just store data about people, we store stories.
The source mentioned that these books allow for small, ordinary moments. And that really resonated with me.
Me too.
Because when I think about the people I've lost, I don't think about their resume. I don't think about their job title or their degree. I think about the way they made coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I think about a stupid joke they told at a barbecue 10 years ago.
Precisely. A resume is for an obituary. A digital guest book is for the collective biography.
Oh, that's good. Collective biography.
It's the collection of those tiny moments, the workplace jokes, the family traditions, the way they hummed while they cooked, that no single person owns.
Right, because everyone has a different piece of them.
The widow knows one version of the man, the college roommate knows a completely different
The
version.
work husband knows a different version. The person they volunteered with at the shelter knows another.
Exactly. When you bring those stories together in one digital space, you get a 360-degree view of the human being. You stop seeing them as just Dad or Bob from accounting, and you start seeing the whole person.
And that's a gift to the family. I mean, imagine learning something new about your dad from a comment left by a guy he worked with 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know your dad once saved the company picnic from a thunderstorm? Or something like that. That's a treasure.
It happens all the time on these platforms. Families discover entire dimensions of their loved one's personality that they didn't know existed. It's profoundly healing to realize that your loved one's impact went further than you even knew.
It gives me chills. It really changes the nature of what we leave behind. Okay, so we know why we should do this. The psychology makes sense, but let's talk about how. Because practically speaking, staring at a blank screen is terrifying. If I send you a link to a digital guest book and say, write something meaningful, you might freeze up.
The blank page problem. It's real. And honestly, it's one of the reasons the traditional guest book survives so long.
Why is that?
Signing your name is easy. It requires zero cognitive load. Writing a tribute requires emotional labor.
It's intimidating. You feel like you have to write something profound. You feel like you have to write poetry or, be Shakespeare.
And when people feel that pressure, they default to cliches. Thoughts and prayers. Sorry for your loss.
Which are fine. I mean, the sentiment is there, but they don't really say anything. They don't add to the story.
Exactly. So, the best platforms are designed to break that text barrier. First, by recognizing that words aren't the only language of grief.
Right. Some people are visual, some people are verbal but not writers.
The ability to upload photos or videos is huge. A photo evokes instant memory. You see a face, you're right back there. But the source material also highlighted audio as a game changer.
Voice notes, like on a messaging app.
Yes. Sometimes writing is physically difficult when you are grieving. Your hands shake, you can't focus, your eyes are swollen.
You're just not in a state to compose a paragraph.
But hitting a record button and just speaking, I miss his laugh, here's what it sounded like. Or just leaving a message saying, I'm thinking of you, I don't know what to say, but I'm here.
Oh, wow.
That auditory connection creates an intimacy that text sometimes lacks.
It preserves the voice of the mourner, too. You can hear the emotion. You can hear the crack in the voice. That is data, too. That is emotional data.
It lowers the barrier to entry. It makes participation accessible to everyone, regardless of how good they are at writing.
Which is so important.
But for those who do want to write, the key is gentle prompts.
I love these examples from the source.
Yeah.
Instead of just a big empty box that says, leave a message, the system asks specific questions.
Right. Things like, what is something you hope others remember about them?
What moment with them still makes you smile? That's a great one.
What do they teach you?
See how that shifts your brain. It moves you from, I need to say something profound about death, to, I just need to answer this specific question about life.
It takes the pressure off. It invites reflection rather than requiring a performance. It turns the task from a burden into a memory exercise.
It's like a good interview. It guides you to the good stuff. But, and here's the big but.
Here it comes.
We have to talk about the design of these platforms. Because if we are moving this online, the immediate comparison is social media. And social media can be, well, a cesspool. It can be toxic.
We have to be very, very careful here. The source material is adamant about this. Compassion versus comparison. An ethical, interactive desk book must not behave like Facebook or Instagram.
No likes. Please, no likes.
Absolutely no likes. Imagine the psychological damage. You post a heartfelt, gut-wrenching story about your mother, and you check back an hour later, and it has 3 likes.
Meanwhile, your cousin posts this funny picture of their dog, and it gets 50 likes.
Oof. That would be devastating. It turns grief into a popularity contest.
A performance.
It creates a hierarchy of grief. Who loved her more? Whose story is better? Who is grieving better? That is toxic.
So tough.
It shifts the focus from internal processing to external validation. So the design must strip away those metrics. No visible engagement counts, no follower counts, nothing like that.
Just simple acknowledgement. Like, I hear you. Maybe a candle icon or a flower icon, but no numbers, no scorekeeping.
Exactly. And the organization should be chronological or thematic, not algorithmic. We don't want an algorithm deciding whose grief is trending.
That is a dystopian thought, trending grief. We definitely want to avoid that.
We must avoid that at all costs. The mantra is, the goal is connection, not visibility.
Connection, not visibility. I like that. And that brings up safety, because the internet is open. If I put a digital guest book out there, how do I stop people from posting spam or selling crypto or, heaven forbid, posting something cruel?
Emotional safety is paramount. The family needs to feel that they are stewards of a safe space, not moderators of a public forum.
So what does that look like?
This means having moderation tools. It means the ability to approve comments before they go live.
Or keeping it private, not making it a public URL.
Yes. Invitation-only access. It doesn't have to be public to the whole world. It can just be for the people who matter. It's about boundaries.
Boundaries are key.
The family needs to be able to disable responses if it becomes too overwhelming. They need to be able to close the book if they need to, take a break.
And there is a practical side to this ethics discussion, too. Data. We all lost photos because a website shut down or a hard drive crashed. If I pour my heart out into a digital guest book, who owns that? Is it going to disappear if the startup goes bust?
This is where the concept of ethical stewardship comes in. Transparency is key. Before you commit, you have to ask, is the data downloadable? How long will the site stay active? Is it hosted on a platform that might go bankrupt next year?
You're trusting them with your memories. That's a big deal.
It is. The source material specifically mentioned the funeral program site in this context.
They did, yeah.
And for good reason. Resources like the funeral program site emphasize safeguarding remembrance across formats. They advocate that you shouldn't just rely on the cloud.
Because the cloud is just someone else's computer.
That's all it is. You need to ensure memories aren't lost if a platform changes. They really stress that integration, using the digital tool, but backing it up, owning the data, having a physical copy.
That's smart. It's digital, but treating it with the permanence of a physical archive. Not renting your memories, but owning them.
Precisely. You are the curator.
Okay, let's shift gears to the timeline of grief. Because earlier we touched on how the funeral is a container that closes. But grief doesn't close.
Not at all.
Grief doesn't own a watch.
No, grief is a long, messy, non-linear process. And the reality of the funeral service is that many people, especially the immediate family, are in a state of shock. They're just numb.
The fog of war, but for sadness. You're just trying to remember to breathe and wear matching socks.
Yes, you're on autopilot. If you hand someone a pen at that moment and say, write how you feel or who was here, they might literally be unable to access their language centers.
You can't do it.
They are just trying to stand up right there in survival mode.
So the traditional book captures them at their worst moment, cognitively speaking, when they're least able to contribute something meaningful.
It captures them at their most overwhelmed. The advantage of the digital platform is that it remains open. It validates the delayed timeline of grief.
Delayed timeline.
Maybe on the day of the funeral, you have nothing to say, you're just empty. But 3 weeks later, the shock wears off, and the sadness hits. Or 6 months later, on their birthday. That is when the stories start to flow.
It gives you permission to not be okay later. The pressure is off.
And it gives you a place to put that love when you have nowhere else to put it. Because that is the scary thing about grief. You have all this love for this person, and suddenly, nowhere to direct it.
It has to go somewhere.
The digital space gives you a destination. It's a place to put the memories and the feelings.
Now, does this replace the funeral? I can hear some traditionalists saying, if everyone just posts online, nobody will come to the service. Why put on a suit if I could just post a comment from my couch?
That's a valid fear. We see it in other industries. Why go to the movies when you have Netflix?
Right.
But the data suggests that for funerals, these tools are complements, not substitutes. Humans still crave physical proximity. We still need to hug.
We need to be together.
We still need to see the body or the casket to process the reality of death. The physical ritual is still deeply important.
So how do you integrate them? How do you make sure the tech doesn't distract from the moment?
Well, you use the physical to bridge to the digital. The source mentions a really elegant solution, using QR codes discreetly placed in funeral programs.
Ah, right. So you're sitting in the pew, holding the program. Again, referencing the funeral program site's emphasis on programs at these crucial bridges, and there is a small code on the back.
Exactly. You don't have to pull your phone out right there in the church. Please don't do that.
Right, that would be terrible.
But you take the program home. Later, when you're alone, having a cup of tea, maybe reflecting on the service, you scan the code. You enter the space then, on your own time.
It respects the solemnity of the physical event, but offers the outlet for the aftermath.
It extends the life cycle of the event. It creates a long tail of remembrance.
A long tail.
It ensures that when the church doors close, the support doesn't end.
I really like that. It feels humane. It feels like it acknowledges how human brains actually work. It meets people where they are.
It does. It removes the urgency to perform grief on a specific schedule.
So as we look further down the road, section 6 of our outline, we talk about legacy. Because eventually, the raw grief fades, hopefully. It changes. And what you are left with is memory.
This is the evolution from grief space to legacy archive. This is a really important shift.
Tell me more.
A condolence book is about the death. A legacy archive is about the life.
Ooh, that's a distinction worth repeating. Say that again.
A condolence book focuses on the loss. I am sorry for your loss. It is centered on the event of death. A legacy archive preserves the person. Here is who they were. Here is what they did.
It's a shift in focus.
Over time, these interactive books transform. They stop being primarily about sadness and start being about history and celebration.
And for future generations. I mean, I have a great-grandfather I know nothing about. I have his name on a genealogy chart. I have a birth date and a death date. I think I have one blurry black and white photo.
Right.
But I don't know his voice. I don't know his jokes. I don't know what his friends thought of him. He's just a name.
That is the tragedy of the analog era. The stories die with the people who held them. But imagine if your great-grandfather had a digital guest book.
Wow.
Imagine if you could click a link today and hear his voice, recorded by a friend, or read stories his army buddies wrote about him in 1945.
Or read what his neighbors thought of him. What he was like as a kid.
It would change your entire understanding of your own history. It would make him real.
That is the promise of this technology, isn't it?
Yeah.
It preserves the voice and presence of the loved one.
It allows children who were too young to remember to go back and meet that person through the eyes of the community.
It's almost like building a time capsule, but crowdsourced.
A crowdsourced time capsule. That's a perfect analogy. You are gathering pieces of the puzzle from everyone who held a piece. And this also helps bridge cultures.
How so?
Well, think about diasporas. Families that are spread across continents. A funeral in New York might be attended by 50 people locally.
Sure.
But the digital space allows the cousins in Ireland, the colleagues in London, the friends in California to all participate. It brings the entire global community into one room.
It democratizes the memorial. It says your distance doesn't invalidate your grief.
It does, but, and we must be culturally sensitive here, families need to consider their own norms. Not every culture handles death this way.
That's a very important point.
Some cultures are very private. Some cultures have taboos about sharing images of the deceased after a certain period.
Right. It's not one size fits all. You can't just impose a Silicon Valley solution on a global tradition.
Never. The design of the space must align with the cultural values of the family. And frankly, some people just don't want it.
The opt-out.
Yes, we have to validate that. Choosing a private, non-interactive option is not failing at modern grief. It's just a different choice. There's a lot of pressure in our society right now to heal publicly.
Oh, performative vulnerability. It's all over social media.
Exactly. The idea that if you didn't post about it, you didn't really care, or if you didn't write a 3-paragraph tribute on Facebook, you are cold.
It's awful pressure.
We need to reject that narrative. Participation must be optional. It must be invited, never compulsory. It can even be anonymous if that helps.
That is such an important ethical stance. We cannot shame people into digital grieving. Everyone processes differently. Some people process in silence, and that is valid.
Completely valid. The tool should serve the need, not create a new burden.
But for those who do choose it, for those who do build this archive, there's this beautiful idea of translating the digital back into the physical.
Yes, this is closing the loop. We talked about how the physical bridges to the digital via the QR code, but it can go the other way too.
How does that work?
Families are taking these digital archives, these hundreds of stories, photos, and transcripts of voice notes, and printing them into high-quality, hardbound memorial books.
A real book you can hold, something you can put on the coffee table.
Or a real book, but look at the difference in content. The traditional guest book was a list of names. This new book is a biography.
It's the collective biography we talked about.
It's rich, it's textured, it's full of life. It affirms that the digital enhances the physical. It doesn't replace it.
Feels like closing the loop. You start with a physical need for connection, you go digital to gather the stories because that's where the people are, and you return to the physical to preserve it for the future.
That is the ideal cycle. It uses the best of both worlds.
So we have covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the dusty book in the hallway to this dynamic living archive.
We have. It's a massive shift when you really think about it.
Let's try to summarize the big takeaways for the listener who's maybe planning a service right now or just thinking about their own digital legacy. What are the headlines?
Okay, headline number 1 is this. We are moving from attendance to participation.
From passive to active.
We are moving from a static list of names to a dynamic multimedia container for collective grief.
And that container is safer, more inclusive, and more enduring than what we had before, if it's designed correctly.
If it's designed correctly, that's the key. It allows us to move from silence to story, from isolation to connection.
It sounds so much healthier.
It can be, but it requires intention. It requires us to choose platforms that prioritize compassion over comparison.
Connection, not visibility.
And it requires trusted guidance, like the resources we mentioned from the funeral program site, to help navigate the tech so it serves the human need, not the other way around.
It's about using the tool, not letting the tool use you.
Exactly.
You know, this whole conversation has made me think about my own interactions. We've been talking about debt for an hour, but it's really making me think about life.
How so?
Well, here is my final thought or question, really. And I want to pose this to you and to everyone listening. If we accept that this is the future, that our grief will be collective and our stories will be crowdsourced, if we know that our life is eventually going to be written as a collective biography by the people around us, how does that change the way we live today?
That is a profound question, a little intimidating, too.
Right. Like, are you living the kind of life where people will have stories to tell? Are you creating those small, ordinary moments that someone will want to type into a text box 10 years from now?
It compels us to be more relational, to realize that every interaction we have, how you treat the barista, how you show up for a friend in a crisis, the jokes you tell at work, is a potential sentence in that biography.
Exactly. We are writing our legacy in real time through the people we touch. We are writing our guest book entries every day while we are still alive. And I think that is a beautiful, if slightly terrifying, thing to remember.
It gives weight to the everyday. It reminds us that we matter to each other in ways we might not even see.
It really does. Look, this has been an incredible deep dive. I hope it gave you all something to think about, whether you are in a season of grief or just curious about how we as humans are evolving.
It's a fascinating evolution, and an important one.
Thank you for guiding us through the psychology of it all. It really changed my perspective on that little book in the hallway.
My pleasure. It was a great conversation.
And to our listener, thank you for participating in this conversation. Remember, remembrance doesn't end when the service ends. It evolves. Take care of each other out there. We'll see you on the next deep dive.